fate of the soldiers who crucified Jesus Christ has been a subject of speculation, mystery, and religious tradition for centuries. The Bible gives us a brief account of their involvement in the crucifixion, but it offers no details on their lives afterward. For the most part, they remain faceless figures in the grand narrative of Jesus' passion. However, over the years, Christian tradition, legend, and theological reflection have sought to fill in the gaps, creating a story of what might have happened to these soldiers after they carried out their grim task. The scene of the crucifixion was set against the backdrop of a volatile Jerusalem under Roman occupation. It was the Passover festival, and the city was filled with pilgrims who had come to celebrate the great Jewish feast. Among them was Jesus of Nazareth, who had stirred controversy with his teachings, drawing both admiration and suspicion. His arrest, trial, and ultimate sentencing to death had sparked tensions between the Jewish authorities and the Roman officials. Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, found himself caught between the demands of the religious leaders who saw Jesus as a threat and the fear of a potential uprising. Pilate ultimately succumbed to the pressure and handed Jesus over to be crucified. It was not a decision made lightly, but as a Roman ruler, Pilate had little interest in theological matters or the identity of the man who had been sentenced. For him, the crucifixion was another in a long line of executions designed to maintain control over the people. The soldiers who were assigned the task of carrying out this execution were no different from any other Roman soldiers, hardened men used to the brutality of their profession. They had likely participated in countless other executions, many of them just as brutal as the one they were about to carry out. These soldiers, likely a small group of centurions and other Roman troops, were tasked with the painful job of preparing Jesus for crucifixion. They stripped him of his clothes, mocked him, and placed a crown of thorns on his head. They spat on him, struck him, and draped a purple robe over him in mockery of his claim to be a king. It was a cruel and inhumane spectacle, but for the soldiers, it was simply another day on the job. They were indifferent to the man who was about to die, seeing him only as another criminal to be executed for the sake of Roman order. As Jesus was led through the streets of Jerusalem to the hill of Golgotha, the soldiers continued their duties, ensuring that the procession moved forward. The crowds jeered and shouted at Jesus, while some mourned his fate. When they arrived at the place of execution, the soldiers carried out their grim task. They nailed Jesus' hands and feet to the cross, raised him up, and stood by to ensure that the execution proceeded without incident. It was a long and painful process, as crucifixion was not a quick death. It involved suffocation, intense physical pain, and prolonged suffering. While the soldiers went about their duties, they remained largely indifferent to the man they were killing. To them, he was just another criminal, and his claims of kingship and divinity were meaningless. But as Jesus hung on the cross, something extraordinary began to happen. Jesus, in his agony, spoke words that were not of anger or revenge, but of forgiveness. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do," he prayed, offering grace even to those who were responsible for his suffering. These words, spoken in the midst of his unimaginable pain, had a profound effect, even on the soldiers who were carrying out the crucifixion. The centurion, the officer in charge of the execution, was the first to react. He had seen countless crucifixions in his time, but something about this one was different. The darkness that covered the land, the earthquake that shook the earth, and the sense of divine power that seemed to envelop the scene made him pause. As he witnessed the manner of Jesus' death and heard his words of forgiveness, the centurion declared, "Truly, this was the Son of God." His declaration was significant, for it marked a moment of recognition from one who had been part of the execution process. It was as if the soldier had been awakened to a truth he had not expected to encounter. In the days that followed, the soldiers who had been involved in Jesus' crucifixion would have returned to their regular duties. For many, it was business as usual. They would have carried out their work under Roman authority, possibly continuing to oversee executions or maintain order in the region. The events of the crucifixion would have been just another story in a long list of duties, soon forgotten in the face of the day-to-day demands of their military service. However, the words of the centurion, who had recognized the divinity of Jesus, would not be so easily forgotten. According to Christian tradition, the centurion, often identified as Longinus, was profoundly affected by the events he had witnessed. Some accounts suggest that he was later healed of blindness after looking at the crucifixion and realizing the truth of Jesus' identity. In some apocryphal texts, it is said that Longinus went on to become a Christian, spreading the message of the resurrection and the gospel. He is sometimes portrayed as one of the first Gentile converts to Christianity. The story of Longinus has become a part of Christian legend, although it is not explicitly mentioned in the New Testament. Some traditions hold that he was martyred for his faith, and his relics were believed to be venerated in later centuries. The Holy Lance, a relic said to be the spear used by the soldier to pierce Jesus' side, became a powerful symbol in Christian tradition. The crucifixion of Jesus, though significant in the Christian faith, was likely seen by many soldiers as just another routine event in a long list of duties. But for those who had witnessed Jesus' death, the memory of what had transpired on Golgotha could not easily be erased. As the years passed, the spread of Christianity began to change the Roman Empire. The message of Jesus' death and resurrection reached far and wide, and more people began to believe in the man who had been crucified. The soldiers who had once been part of his execution were no longer just anonymous figures in history. They became part of the story of salvation, representing the possibility of redemption for all people, even those who had once been responsible for the death of Christ. It was said that Longinus, after coming to believe in Jesus, took the spear and became a believer, ultimately suffering martyrdom for his newfound faith. The notion that a Roman soldier, who had once been complicit in the death of Jesus, could be redeemed and transformed into a devoted follower of Christ is a powerful image in Christian theology. But what of the other soldiers who participated in the crucifixion? The Bible does not offer any additional details about their lives, and Christian tradition is largely silent on their fate. Some may have remained indifferent, continuing their service under the Roman Empire. Others may have been struck by the events they had witnessed and, like Longinus, come to a new understanding of who Jesus was. Perhaps some of them, after hearing of the resurrection and the spread of the Christian message, eventually converted to Christianity themselves. It is not difficult to imagine that the same divine grace that had touched the Centurion could have reached others in the years that followed. For the Roman soldiers, life continued in a world that was unchanged by the events surrounding the crucifixion. They would have faced battles, participated in military campaigns, and carried out the orders of their superiors. The empire was vast, and the soldiers were the backbone of Roman authority. Some of these soldiers may have lived out their lives in obscurity, fading into the pages of history. Others, like Longinus, may have been touched by the power of the gospel and become fervent Christians, spreading the message of Jesus to others. The story of the soldiers who crucified Jesus is ultimately a story of grace, of how even those who were involved in the most tragic event in human history could be given the opportunity for transformation and redemption. In the end, we may never know the full details of what happened to the soldiers who crucified Jesus. But their story, whether it ends in redemption or in obscurity, serves as a reminder of the power of God's forgiveness and the far-reaching implications of the cross. The soldiers who played a part in the crucifixion of Jesus were mere instruments in a greater divine plan, and their lives, like all lives, were not beyond the reach of God's grace. We have gotten to the end of this video. If you find this video interesting, kindly like, subscribe and comment your opinion. We will appreciate that a lot.